let's talk a little bit about coping, which is, I think, very, very important, because some of the issues we all face in the everyday life, we can't change a lot of these things, right? We can't change them. So coping almost seems like a negative term, doesn't it? It's like, yeah, you got to do what you can type thing, but you can't change it. And so we just got to put up with it type thing, tolerate. But in some cases, it's actually the only thing we have. And it's better than not coping, right? Before we start coping with certain things, we got to ask ourselves, and we ask ourselves literally, out loud, self-positive talk, we call it in psychology, because the brain is a little bit like a computer. Whatever you put in, you're going to get out. If I use my mouse and double click on Facebook, the computer doesn't know I want Twitter. It's going to open up Facebook. The brain's the same. If we use negative language, the brain doesn't know you want to be happy. It's just going to give you negative results. That's the way it is. So the keyboard to our brain is our speech. It overrides what we think. That's why it's so important to have that self-positive talk. And if any of you have Googled or will Google successful people in the world, what they've done, what they don't do, the 10 top things they do. And so I get to tell you, number one, most of the time is the time they wake up, early. So you've got more time to achieve, number one. But within that list, I can guarantee you is self-positive talk, because they know that it's not going to be an easy ride. And that could be just going to the shop buying bread, you know what I mean? Which, by the way, we're all allowed to do now, which is fantastic. But even that, you might encounter someone that doesn't treat you nice or so forth. Something very domestic can lead to a little bit of anger or anxiety, stress, you know. It starts accumulating. So we can utilize that, not only in times of need, but even in the everyday life. When we talk to ourselves, we say, I'm not going to allow that person to affect me. Just by saying that in that tone, it's in a convincing tone. The brain will only pick it up if it's convincing. Because if I'm showing that I'm upset and I say, I'm not going to allow that person to affect me, the brain's not convinced. You got to become like an actor. You're getting into the right. You know what? I'm not going to allow that person to affect me. And I'm not going to react to this. You're telling your brain, your keyboard is your speech, because your thought is, God, I really want to do something that I shouldn't now. I want to say something. I want to do something that I might regret, or I don't really like that person. All these things, and your brain's going, okay, that's fine. It's not going to talk you out of it. It's just going to process and give you the emotion and the behavior that you want for that. Just like if you're in the jungle and you see, you know, a jaguar running after you, you're not going to start analyzing. You're going to go, wow, this is scary. And your brain's going to go, let's get out of here. And it's going to start getting your legs to move and your breath to go quick. It's part of the animal kingdom. It's part of our survival to react quickly. So the brain is used to that. That's what it does. So if you initiate that, it doesn't know it's a jaguar. It's just a person at the counter being really rude. But the reaction may be the same. You know, we've all watched the news and seen what people have done and go, wow, really? You know, just because of that, they've done this. Yeah, well, the brain is very fragile. It's very easily convinced. All you got to do is talk to people and just see the things that they that they want to do or they believe in. You go, wow, really? And it's so different to ours. But, you know, somewhere along the line, they've convinced themselves, and that's fine. We're all different. So we all have our own perspective, that's all. But in that moment, if you utilize self-positive talk, you can control that. That's number one. That's the number one thing you can do. So if it's something you can control, then you don't need to cope with it. You finalize it right there. And there's many things in life. We have more control over things than what we think. It took me a very long time to work out that my happiness doesn't depend on whether I pass an exam or whether someone likes me or whether certain things happen. Of course, when we're young, all those things are important, of course. But as we get older, we start with, hang on, I've got more control over my emotions, my happiness than what I thought. It'd be great if we could be taught that a lot younger, you know. But sometimes we just need the experience. So we can pass that knowledge onto our kids, onto the younger generation, so they don't suffer as much, and telling them that, you know, one day this won't mean much. And that's very comforting. So The stuff that we can control, that we don't need inside us, we immediately wipe it out. We have to choose. Ask yourself, do I have control over this? Well, I don't have control of what they're saying, but I do have control of how I'm going to feel about it. Now, all the rest of the stuff, that's what we cope with. So we've already eliminated a lot. And so how do we cope? We cope, number one, is by having a very, very good structure. So if you know someone that has depression, the first thing you got to do is listen, yes? And listening means just being silent and acknowledging what they're saying without giving any further advice. If you find it's something serious, definitely, you don't need to diagnose them, but definitely recommend them to see someone. Maybe you need to see someone a bit more prepared than me, or I'd love for you to be able to talk to someone about this that may be able to help you, because it seems like it does affect you, so you give them feedback of what they're saying in a sentence. I understand exactly what you're saying. I can imagine how that would make you feel. And it's fine if you ask for help. It's great that you came to me, and I'll be here any time you need. But I'd also recommend that maybe you need to talk to someone that can guide you, or maybe because there might be things that I might not be able to do, like provide medication or provide long-term therapy and so forth. So that's the number one thing. Listening silently, being empathetic, and allowing the person to describe things, and then just in a sentence summarizing what they said in an empathetic way by using the word "I understand," but without giving too many solutions, because I'm sure if they're a smart person, they've already worked out that there are some solutions. A lot of the times we just want to be heard, listened to. So once we get to that phase, then it's important that we advise them with some coping mechanism. If they don't want to talk to someone and they just want to have a chat to you, give them this suggestion. You know what you need to do? You need to organize your day, because structure and routine is very important. You start from there. And this is for yourself as well. For those that don't work, shift work, between Sunday night and Thursday night, you should be going to bed every day the same. This is what I'll be saying to them. Be going to bed at the same time, put an alarm on, so then your brain gets triggered to go to bed, just like you have an alarm to get up. Even if you get up anyway without an alarm, have an alarm, because we call it conditioning in psychology. We condition ourselves to do certain things. What that means is that we use something to affect our behavior. Have you ever seen like the cartoons with the boxers? When they hear the bell, bing, bing, they start pulling punches. Well, they've been conditioned to hear a bell and pull punches, because that's what they do all day. There was a famous experiment in the 70s, the rat in a cage that they used. They had a rat, that there was a buzzer and electric shock, a mild electric shock. Buzzer, mild electric shock. Buzzer, mild electric shock. Then buzzer, no electric shock. The rat would still jump, because it's been conditioned to jump straight after the buzzer. And we are like that as well. If we have an alarm, we know we're getting up. We know we're tackling the day. If we have an alarm to go to bed or something that advises us, it's bedtime. Our brain switches off. It's said, okay, now we're concentrating on sleeping. And we do that with children, don't we? For all of us that have had children, bed routine is very important. There's a certain structure. Eat, bath, bed, storytelling, cuddle, and then sleep. And the same again. So the child knows as soon as you start reading, it's time to fall asleep. They know what's coming next, and our brain loves that from very little. That certainty, what's coming next. So you might be stressed, you might be a little bit depressed. You can say to them, but if you know what time you're going to go to bed, you know you have some control over your day. And so that's very important. That's what I'd be suggesting to them, having that ability to control how long they're going to be awake for and how long they're going to be in bed. They may not necessarily sleep, because that's different. But if you're in bed, then you have a very good chance of sleeping. If the person says, well, actually, when I go to bed is the worst time because I start thinking about negative things and I toss and turn, and that's when I actually start getting a bit anxious because I can't switch off my brain. It seems like they're having a bit of anxiety too. And in that case, if it's detrimental and significant, it's important for that person to be able to go to bed, and if they can't sleep after half an hour, get up for 5 minutes, avoid any caffeine, have a bit of a read of some magazine, and then try again with a little breathing exercise. And this is something you can tell them. This is a very, very simple breathing exercise for anyone that's suffering from depression or anxiety. And you don't need to learn meditation or anything else. It's very, very simple. And it's basically just sitting upright or lying flat on your bed with no pillow, so you're nice and flat. And again, give yourself the order by talking to yourself out loud. I'm going to do the breathing exercise. You tell your brain, this is what we're doing. I'm doing the breathing exercise. You've seen it all with sports people. When tennis players do exactly the same ritual, they bounce the ball 3 times. They might touch their head, or footballers might do a certain thing or point up. And why? Because they're telling their brain, what we want to do is kick that ball in between those posts, like we've done all week. So nothing else matters. And the brain goes, oh, okay, you got the brain on your side now. You got your brain with you straight away. So you got to see your brain as a different entity. You got to bring it onto your team, because sometimes we've all had those problems of lack of concentration. So these little rituals, this self-positive talk, gives us an opportunity to control that better. It's not bulletproof, of course, but it gives us an opportunity to focus, to tell our brain that we're focusing. I'm going to do the breathing exercise. You lie down, you can put your hands on your belly and just breathe in for 4 seconds. So you actually breathe in for 4 seconds, not deeply, but just you control it. So you count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then out 4 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 3, 2, 1. If you can't whisper it, you can think it. So you go. Four in, 4 out. If the person is very anxious or has panic, they can do 3 seconds, because it's a lot harder. You do it for 4 minutes. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, 4 minutes. And you're going to get thoughts in your head. This is the magic of meditation, of mindfulness that we call now, is that it's very difficult to turn off our brain. Unless you studied meditation for a very long time, it's very hard to do. I find the best thing to do is not worry about turning off your brain. Just let the thoughts come in. But there's a trick. You decide to detach from those thoughts emotionally. That's the trick. So when you find people that are very good in stressful situations, they've got the same issues. They're listening to the same things. They're in the same situation as the others, but they remain calm. Why? Not because they blocked their ears or they've decided to think about something different. They've detached their emotion from their thoughts. So the thought's there, the event's there, the situation is there, but emotionally they've decided to detach. That takes time, but if you start now with that breathing exercise, observing your thoughts, it could be, that person at the supermarket, the checkout chick was so rude. That could have been the thought coming in. But you know what? You observe that thought without feeling any anger, any frustration, any anxiety, and by transcending from that thought, from just observing it like you're detached from it, like it's in your brain, but it's not in you, in your spirit, in your soul, in your personality, if you like. It's just a thought there. Just like I could think of now, a jaguar running after me. I could picture that, but I don't have any anxiety because I'm detaching myself from that. Now, if I were a really, really good actor, and that's my scene now, and the director says, let's go action, I've got to make sure I'm attached to that thought, because I want to make it very realistic. And when you see a very interesting and realistic, powerful acting scene, that's what they're doing. They convince their brain that the event is happening for that moment. And that can be done. And just like that can be done, you can do the opposite. You can convince your brain that it's not happening. And so you're looking at the thought, you'll see the words, but you're not attached to it. And that's what we practice. You can pass that on. That is the one and most powerful thing that I can transmit to you today, because I know it works. I've been doing this for 27 years. Most people don't do it, to tell the truth, because it's so simple that they don't do it. they need complexity, because we're doing psychology, you know. Psychology starts with 5 consonants, P, S, Y, C, H. That's a difficult word, you know. Everything else must be difficult, but it's actually quite simple. It's the most simple things that work in life. But you know what the trick is? Doing it. It's just like you want to put muscle, you want to put biceps. Well, you get a dumbbell, 10 kilo, and you go like that 10 times, and then you wait 30 seconds, you do it 10 more times, you wait 30 seconds, you do it 10 more times. Then the next day you do the same thing. After a week, you put 5 kilos on there, and guess what? In a month, I can guarantee you're going to have bigger biceps. Same with any other muscle. It's simple, isn't it? But the thing is to do it. That's the thing. With this, it's important that you do it. And if you have someone that you know that suffering from depression, do it with them. And you can do it sitting upright like this. Look. And you know what the trick is also I do in my practice, because it's quite intimidating when someone's got their eyes closed and you're facing them. I face the other way, you know. You can face, look, take your time, face the other way. And you breathe with them and count, and let them count with you. And you see how powerful that is. After 4 minutes, your brain is quite calm. And you do that. I would do that a couple of times a day in the morning, start the day off, 4 minutes investment, go to bed, do the same. And what happens is that you're practicing detaching yourself emotionally from events, from your own thoughts. Eventually, you'll be able to, just like you grow those biceps, you'll be able to have more control. Not total, of course, because we're emotional beings, aren't we? And it would be terrible to live like a robot. But it's good to have some control, especially with things that don't really matter, like the checkout chick. Who cares? Next time you go there, she might not be there, you know, or you go to another checkout, or you go to another supermarket, or even she is, doesn't matter. It's by necessity, you know. So, but it can affect us so much. We've all had that someone that's cut us off on the road, or something little that someone said, or so we got a text, and what do you mean by that? Something, and sometimes it's by people that we don't really care about, yet it affects us. And so we need to work on those little ones first, and then work our way up to more complex. And then there's people in our lives that we love terribly, of course, and we do cope with them because we love them. And so we don't want to change them, and we also don't want to become robotic to them. So there's a compromise. But for everyone else, which is 90% of the people which I call tourists, they come into our lives and then you don't see them again. It's important to use those techniques, because all that stress adds up. So coping mechanism number 1 is the routine and the structure. Number 2, that self-positive talk. Always keep it going inside your head. We all have that voice, don't we? But check to see what type of language you're using, and ask others to just some advice. You know, how do you think I went yesterday at the dinner party? But it's probably best just to keep an eye out on the language that we're using and see what other people are doing. But also, it's important that, we do that little breathing exercise at least twice a day. That's good. It's something that you can pass on to people. It's very, very valuable. It's very simple, and its preciousness is tied up with its simplicity, because it's something that's not a chore you can do. And if you don't do 4 minutes, do 1 minute. 0 to something is huge, I always say. So it doesn't really matter whether it's exercising, whether it's trying to save up money. From $0 to $1 is a lot. You know what I mean? From nothingness to something. And same with our own self-development. There are issues, of course, for people that have severe depression, that if they come across as suicidal or self-harm, the best way to ask someone if they're suicidal is pretty much straight up asking them. Don't beat around the bush. Yeah, maybe you can avoid the word suicide, but as they're talking, and this is a technique that psychologists and psychiatrists use, it's the shock of being asked straight up that does it. It's a bit like word association. You know, we associate something, we kind of like the first thing that comes to mind. So if they know you're going to ask them, they can prepare an answer. But the best thing is to say, so what time do you go to bed? Okay. So you're eating well? Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on hurting yourself? Yeah, straight up like that. That's the best way in psychology we find. You can say, do you have any thoughts of hurting yourself? Because it's very different. Or have you hurt yourself? That might be a bit intimidating. Or have you ever had any thoughts? Because remember, the thought is tied to the emotion is tied to the behavior. In order to actually self-harm, you need to have the thought first. Yep. And so ask them whether they had the thought. And if it's yes, of course, that's when you've got to recommend. If they have already a plan, or obviously if you're in a situation that's desperate, then you just need to ring 000. Don't hesitate. Just ring the ambulance and then it can be dealt with later. That's fine. If you find this, don't try to counsel them out of it, or if you're in a situation that someone is about to hurt themselves, the first thing you do is ring an ambulance and then obviously just listen to them and maybe try to delay. All you're doing is delaying. For ourselves, if there's people here that do have self-harm thoughts, it's very important that you pick up the phone, make an appointment with your GP and tell them what's happening, and they will refer you to someone appropriate. If it's severe, again, just go to a hospital. Just like if you've burnt yourself or you've broken your leg, psychology and mental health is as important. Just because you can't see it on an X-ray doesn't mean it's not there. So the main thing is to get out of the rut. But for most of the time with depression, we usually have time. So it's important to make sure we focus on those thoughts. Thought is very important. That's why, a lot of you may have heard cognitive behavioral therapy. A lot of psychologists use that. Now, cognition is the old Latin word for thinking, And so thinking, behavior. And that pretty much says it all. If someone's behaving depressed, they're probably thinking depressed. So in therapy, we try to change that negative thinking in order to change the behavior. And you can do that on yourself. You'll find that if you change your own thinking, you're going to feel a lot better. It's very, very powerful. It's more powerful than what we think. And like I said, I wish I had known this when I was a lot younger, but it's never too late. And we have more control over things over the external world than what we believe. So you pass on that information to people, which is a little bit of psychological stuff that you can show that you've learned. But I think just being human, being empathetic, being a good listener is a great start with anybody, really. We just don't know what people are going through. We just don't know. Even that checkout chick that has treated us so badly, who knows what she's going through. So it's always best to be conservative with that sense. I always try to remind myself, because it doesn't come natural to me, but I try to remind myself to look in the good in anyone, in everyone that approaches, regardless of how bad they may seem. Start off with that premise and then move on. Sometimes you can't find that, and it's true. There are, people that struggle being good, and we know that. But the good thing about that, if they're not part of our lives, they don't have to be. So you can only do what you can do at that moment. With regards to our thinking, remember, utilize those little exercises and pass it on to as many people as you can, especially the young people. It's the ones that need it most are the young people. For us, a bit more experience, we come to a stage of our lives that, look, bring it on. If stuff happens, I'm equipped now. I'm not going to like it, but I'm equipped. But young people don't have the experience yet, and all the knowledge, and it's wonderful when they have someone with that knowledge passing it on. Remember, Plato said, knowledge is power, my friend. Start giving some power out there. But I think it's time to round off. So we've identified some symptoms with regards to physical symptoms, regards to how people behave towards us, towards others, how they're changing what they do, what they don't do, mainly what they don't do, what they've given up, and their language. And we've also looked at some coping with the things we have to cope with, the stuff we don't have to cope with. Get it out of your life as quick as possible, and decide to do so with self-positive talk. With the things we do have to cope with, structure, routine, conditioning ourselves to react. If you need to go to the gym, just put your joggers on. That's condition. As soon as you put your joggers on, that means I'm going to the gym. And so I don't feel like going to the gym. You know what? Don't think about it. Just put your joggers on and go to the gym. And the next time you do it, it's going to be easier. By the time you do it 40 times, you won't even think of it. Between your joggers, you'll be going to the gym. It's done. You know what I mean? And that's the same with most aspects in life. It takes time. It doesn't take long. Human brain adapts very quickly. With regards to severe issues such as suicide and so forth, make sure if you're in one of those situations, just ring the appropriate authorities and for them to take care of it, and delay. That's all you got to do. For the ones that aren't so forth, ask them to do that little meditation exercise and be a good listener. Yeah.